okay now.
No, it's not! It's not okay! I saw it, I was wrong!
Hello everyone, now we're up to the middle episode of Season 2, The Hounds of Baskerville. But is it going to be another middle episode like The Blind Banker? We'll have to see. This episode is directed by Paul McGuigan, it's written by Mark Gatiss, and came out January 8th, 2012. Now the thing about the story is I actually think it's the weakest part of the episode. I think the characters and the visuals and the way everything was put together was actually much more interesting and finite than the actual story was. However, when I first watched the episode, I still loved it. I thought it was very interesting. I liked where they went with it. I thought the mystery was good too. But overall, it's not the most interesting story, and it could have been written a little better. No offense to Mark Gatiss. It's definitely not bad. It feels like it's more written for the characters rather than the mystery and the plot. However, I still like most of the scenes, and I like the horror tone it has to it, and the creepiness. But Mark Gatiss has mentioned in interviews how this one was difficult for him to write, and I think you can see that in it. It's not bad. Then again, I haven't read the books. So for anyone who has, is this an interesting take on the book? Is it adapted good? I feel like this episode has more iconic scenes rather than working together as a whole, that all the scenes don't really all mesh together well, but all the scenes that do happen that are great are truly great and are perfectly done. Of course, the opening scene was perfect. I've come to the conclusion that every single opening scene of Sherlock is absolutely perfect. The harpooning a dead pig, I'm pretty sure was a reference from the books too, so that was pretty great. And the fight between John and Sherlock is so perfect. You could tell just how close friends they are and just how much they get on each other's nerves. I like the build-up of this episode, how they take the time to go to Dartmoor, the town, and how you get to know the characters there. When they go to the lab, and the way that's done, Sherlock only went there for the Bluebell investigation, was a funny and hilarious, unexpected twist on the story. Something that I also noticed about this episode is that we don't quite follow Sherlock's motives and deductions as much as we do with other episodes. We kind of feel like we're watching him a little lost. However, this doesn't really detract from the episode much. It just makes it different from the other episodes where we follow him more. And while that should be in complaint, the way that they do it makes it more intriguing rather than annoying. John's side plots were really well done too, when he goes off to investigate on his own with the blinking lights which leads to probably one of the funniest moments in the whole show. And him being locked in the lab was scary and exciting, and I was confused. I was wondering if there actually was a dog. The way it was filmed, it was really good piece of the story that really worked. But when it comes to the story, it feels like a mystery that could have been 30 minutes was condensed into 90 minutes and felt very stretched, with sequences of Russell Tavoy's character Henry Knight being terrified in between to kind of spread out the story. And while it was really fun to see those scary and exciting scenes to make it a horror episode, you can kind of tell that it could have been done in like an hour. And then, of course, we have to talk about the Mind Palace scene. This is one of my favorite scenes in the whole show. Having the Mind Palace, because it's actually something that exists in real life, but Sherlock is so brilliant, he takes that to a whole nother level. We got to see how Sherlock's mind works, and for the story, this is really good because it wasn't really progressing anywhere. He was just as confused as we are, and to have this one moment of realization kept the story going again when it started to slow down. I think that might be the biggest problem. The middle starts to slow down because Sherlock is just as confused as we are, considering that he's seen the Hound, which was an amazing character piece, by the way, but that's for later. After this, things start to slow down because we don't know where we're going with the story, and we don't know what the characters are going to go with the story. So I'm glad that with this Mind Palace scene, we got the solution to the mystery. While the ending was very dramatic, I will say it's not the best ending in the show. I felt this the second time I watched it, I realized just kind of how, like, a little unsatisfying it was. It was satisfying, but something about it was very, oh, this is the answer! Yay! There was no particular thing about it. The villain, while surprising, was not interesting at all. It was surprising to see him blow up, and it was very dramatic, but overall did kind of feel like, oh, mystery's done, and nothing particularly huge happened. Except for Henry Knight almost killing himself, of course. The conclusion with the lab was funny, how Sherlock was the one to set up the lab plan. I died. And the Moriarty cliffhanger is creepy as hell. Now, to me at least, the characters are the much more interesting part of this episode. I think that this is probably the best character episode in the show. Not only are all the characters written very well, but the way every single character in this episode is balanced out and spread throughout the story is very helpful. But most of all, we see Sherlock in a state we have never seen him before. Scared and confused, which is crazy. For Sherlock, by seeing the impossible, he's lost all of his senses and he can't even make sense of himself. He's in a complete denial state when John and him are sitting at the fireplace. First of all, huge props to Benedict Cumberbatch for memorizing a deduction that was 2 minutes long. That is not a joke. Benedict had to speak for 2 minutes straight in that deduction scene. Wow. We see Sherlock truly fears not understanding something, and this makes him go on the defensive, which then even threatens him and John's friendship by saying he doesn't have any friends. It's just so sad. Another thing we see is how Sherlock's mind palace is both a blessing and a curse. He remembers everything, or he can remember everything, and he just has to make a trace back to it. And that scene is so important, not just visually in how it looks, but we see that it's kind of a curse because he kind of looks like demonic, that his brain is taking over himself, that's why he kind of isn't very emotional, that all this knowledge, this intelligence kind of makes him the unsociable and confused with other people person that he is. And in the end, when he figures out that it's the pressure pads that's making the narcotic, and he attacks the man who's behind it, and he sees Moriarty's face, we get an idea on how scared Sherlock actually is of Moriarty. Like I said earlier, what's different about Sherlock in this episode is that we don't actually follow his motives until he explains them. And while that could be a complaint, I think it's an interesting take on the character. John is great in this episode too. He isn't particularly helpful, he tries to be, but what's great about John in this episode is we really get to see Sherlock and John's friendship and the core of their friendship. There's perfect banter between him and Sherlock in that opening scene. It really feels like they've known each other for so long, especially when the client rings the doorbell and they finish each other's sentences.
Single ring.
Maximum pressure just under the half second. Client.
And we see how hurt he is by Sherlock's remarks. When he's later on the date, he expresses just how concerned he is about Sherlock, despite him being really angry at what he said. The lab scene. John was so great in this lab scene. We feared for him. It was scary. And when Sherlock finds him, you saw my opening. It's one of my favorite moments in the whole show. Props to Martin. John is just great. Now, the character of Henry Knight is a character we can sympathize with, but what I like most about the character of Henry Knight is actually the acting. I think Russell Tovey does a phenomenal job as this person, and to be honest, like between Laura Pulver as Irene and Russell Tovey as Henry Knight, while I think Irene is a much more interesting and cool character, both of their acting abilities I think were pretty much equal. You can truly see the psychological damage he has, and he's not like crazy or anything. You sympathize with him and you understand he is a good person, but you slowly start to see him fall apart, and Russell Tovey does a really good job with that, and you want the mystery to be solved quickly to help this man. And the phenomenal tense conclusion is one of the things that makes the conclusion better than it kind of already was, when he is going to maybe kill himself. The tense and the dark, and his character is just at the lowest low, but he has this constant drive for his father's belief, and I really like this character. Would I want to see him again? Not particularly, not at least compared to Irene. It was a surprise to see Lestrade in this episode, and for him to actually do something. Looking through the records, I thought that was great. I thought it was surprising. I was like, oh yeah, Lestrade. And I talk about Lestrade too much in this. Only because I feel like we need more of him. But he was great in this episode, he was great in the conclusion, and I'm happy he was in it. The other side characters are very well balanced. The therapist, the two people who own the store, they all had a point and a significant role in the story. Now, like how I said the music in A Scandal in Belgravia kind of amped up and improved the episode, this is how I feel about the visuals in this episode. I adore the direction this episode has. Every single shot is shot so interestingly. When they're in the lab and there's different like camera angles, when they open up the doors, the way the text is on the wall, when the code is being broken through. I love the new location. This episode takes place outside of London. We have 3 locations. We have the lab, we've got Dartmoor, Dewars Hollow, and all of their locations have a mood and tone that matches the mood and tone of the scene that they're in. I like the town. I think it's quaint, it's quiet, it gives us a nice place to rest and continue on with the story. The lab is exciting and interesting, and we know a lot of stuff is going to get done there. And of course, the creepiness of Doer's Hollow. The Hollow is so scary and interesting. So, location-wise, while of course the story of Sherlock should always take place in London, I am so happy that where they did go was really pretty. Like, the shot of Sherlock standing on top of that rock, and just the nature shots in general. They have these nature shots that are really interesting as well, that I think really add to the tone of the episode and improve something that may not have been as perfect as it could have been. The scenes that are supposed to be scary are filmed very scary and creepy. It's just shot very well, and the lighting in particular too, like with the flashlights in the dark and the Umkra car lights, and how bright it looks in the lab, like really bright, and then it looks sunny in the... I don't know. This is just visually a very fun episode. Now, the music is great because it matches the tone of the scene that it's in. So when they're in Dartmoor, it's very relaxing. I like the little do-do-do-do, like the little notes. The Dartmoor music is kind of like the calm before the storm. Like, you know that something is going to happen, but, you know, this is kind of setting up to that. But then once we get to the Hound and the Doer's Hollow and Henry Knight's Nightmares, then we get a really creepy soundtrack that is just filled with, like, dark, deep tones of anguish and pain. And the music is a little different than the normal Sherlock music. I mean, one of the songs is really unique and different, and it's in the lab. It's really exciting and different. I mean, I don't really have too much to go into detail with the music. I mean, the sound effects were cool too. I mean, I can't actually point out specific sound effects. The scene where John is in the lab, you even hear his 4 chords again. See, I like how each character has like their own little theme song in a way, and the John 4 chord thing has stuck with him the entire time. So John is scared. Let's bring out the 4 chords, but in the Hounds of Baskerville version. I think this episode is almost a definition of style over substance. While I still believe that it is a great episode, I can see its flaws and I don't turn a blind eye to them. However, this is a fun episode, an exciting episode, a horror episode. It's greatly directed, the music is scary, and I actually still like this story even though I've mentioned all its problems, because when I first watched it, I truly did love it, and I can't ignore that. So as surprising as this may be, this actually tops A Study in Pink and The Blind Banker for me, and this is my 4th favorite episode. If you like this review, you can check out my other episodes and subscribe. Bye!
Can we not do this time?
Do what?
You being all mysterious with your cheekbones and turning your coat collar up so you look cool.
I don't do that.
Yeah, you do.